Hi, it's Catherine here, the author of TORIANA, and I'm going to be bringing you the next chapter, chapter 21. Romeo and Juliet. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. 1 Corinthians 13 verse 7. Time did not stand still as I had hoped. After being in his arms and the beautiful bracelet on my wrist, Rob drove me to the airport to return to South Sudan. We knew we loved each other very much, and we knew we wanted to be together, but we both had to wait on the Lord and see his plan unfold in our lives. I had responsibilities in South Sudan, a team to lead and a school to complete. How would I tell the people I had lived amongst that I felt God had a different calling on my life? Now on the plane, looking out of the window with such love in my heart, it hurt. How many times had I loved and then had to get on a plane and leave the one I loved behind? This is part of the life of a missionary, following the call and saying, Lord, not my will, but your will be done. So I left my Romeo Robert behind in Port Elizabeth with the hope that I would see him again. I, crazy Kath, was his Juliet, not looking from a balcony but a plane window, hoping to return into his arms soon. Upon landing in Johannesburg, my dad met me and we had a really deep heart-to-heart chat. He saw how much I loved Robert and that he made me very happy. We also shared with my beloved Granny Doreen my news, and she asked me the surname. I told her Falconer. In no time she phoned me back to say that this was a very good family and that she played tennis with Robert's great-uncle and aunt. We also discovered that the Falconers had Scottish and Irish origin, like my family, Fitzpatrick. Gran could not believe it, as she never wanted me to go to South Sudan. She felt I would never find a husband there. She feared that I would either marry some strange person or remain a widow in the middle of Africa. She was amazed that across the world, through internet waves, God had woven a family into my life that my grandparents knew well. This was a miracle for my gran. We were both very excited. God works in incredible ways, a tapestry where sometimes we can only see the threads behind, but he is weaving a masterpiece. My dad and Marike had also been in South Sudan with me and had been part of reaching the Ochilang people for Christ in the Lopet Mountains. They knew this was important too and were trying to help me make the right decisions. They had come to know Joshua and Justina Masuva, an amazing Kenyan family who I worked with in South Sudan. I had approached them to pray about possibly taking over the leadership of the team and lead instead of me. We prayed about it and they were open to the idea, as were my Daguna and AIM leaders. My dad then suggested that he write a letter to the chiefs of the village to tell them that he was calling his daughter home for courtship and possible marriage. We prayed and felt this would be the most honorable thing to do, for the Low people to understand why I had to leave. We agreed that I would only hand over the letter towards the end of my stay in the Lopet Mountains. So I flew to South Sudan, knowing that it would be the last 6 months there before saying goodbye. At the time, I didn't realize the depth of love I had for the Lopet people, and I longed to see them all turn their hearts towards Christ. The Lopet people lived in an animistic world, one where they often lived in fear if they didn't make offerings to the rainmaker or witch doctor or healer. If something went wrong or there was a death, they would always look back at something they or someone else in the village did. We came with a message of love and hope that would set them free of this bondage. I always had such joy when a Lopet friend came to Jesus Christ, but then I learned the truth. This is why it is so important for missionaries to live amongst the people. You see how they actually live their lives, and they see how you actually live your life for Christ in the midst of hardship and sickness and death. They had watched me sick with malaria and I did not die. They had watched me pray for and sleep through nights with their loved ones until they were healed. They had watched me mourn the death of Martin and live a life content in Christ as a widow with no children. At the same time, I saw how they wanted to commit their lives to Christ and did commit their lives to Christ, but many kept to their old ways too. In their defense, they felt they were doing the right thing, appeasing all gods, their gods and my God. Their relationship with God was more like Lot and his wife. Lot running towards God and away from sinful practices, and Lot's wife not wanting to leave the customs and ways that were destructive and evil. Some who did follow Christ fully and left their ways and customs were never fully understood by their own people. The Lopit people were strong in their ways and customs, and I often found this hard. In the midst of living with them in the village, I had come to still love them. I had spent months and years learning their culture, and one of the things I learned was the price of some brides in the village. It was 30 goats and 20 cows, and this could be negotiated. One morning I was walking down the hill to teach at the school, and I was met by a person who I thought was Lopit. He asked me how much it was to marry me. I told him I was too expensive. This was my standard line in Lopit. Then he asked me how much. I said 50 cows, as I knew most people in Lopit did not have this. The next day, as I was walking to school, there this man was with 50 cows. I quickly walked straight to the school and sat with some of the men lead teachers to explain what I had done. They all laughed and said, "TORIANA, he's not Lopit. He's a Turkana man, and they sometimes have more than 100 cows." I quickly went back to him to apologize and said that I was only joking. I learned very quickly not to make jokes like this again. During my time in Lopit Okilang, we had built an airstrip with the local people. We had made a Lopit bamboo mud-style church and were in the process of building a school. I had sold 2,000 of my TORIANA books. These books were only up to chapter 12. To raise money to build the school. My dream was that the school was a community build and not a TORIANA school. The younger men and youth made bricks from the clay soil in the area. The women brought jerry cans of water. The younger men carried large rocks for the older men to break down into smaller stones. I contributed the cement and the roofing as a member of the community. Together with the help of some builders, the school classrooms were built. I then worked with village leaders to develop the Lopit alphabet further into little booklets that they could use in schools as their language had not been written. Duguna helped me with this project. I then wanted to take packs of these booklets from village to village with some training on how to use them and how to train the students how to write the letters and the words in the sand. This was a very exciting project for me, and I managed to complete it. My days were full, and I looked forward to the evenings where Robert and I would Skype call. We would email questions to each other of the things we wanted to know and learn about each other. It was a very special time for us, as we really became best of friends. We spent time praying for each other too, and this was beautiful. I learned about his love for architecture, and I also learned who his favourite architects were in South Africa, like Sir Herbert Baker. He was one of them. I then wrote to my gran and her dear friend Lucy to ask her to find out if they could explore the various architectural sites of Sir Herbert Baker. Lucy and my gran used to explore various historical sites together every Thursday. So they were very excited to investigate, explore, and send me pictures of some of their findings. They discovered that Rhodes Memorial in Cape Town was one of Sir Herbert Baker's creations just at the base of Table Mountain. They then found a beautiful Anglican church close by with the most wonderful architecture, stone arches and mosaic glass windows. My gran shared these pictures with me via email, and then I forwarded them on to Robert. It was a wonderful time to share all together. Then one day we were contacted by chiefs and leaders that there was fighting between villages and tribes. There was a threat of an enemy attack. It was one thing to watch movies about this kind of thing or to hear stories about it, but it was another thing to be in the midst of it. AM Air and MAF Air were on standby. We had to have our emergency bags packed, ready to flee. I still had the letter from my dad tucked away in my Bible, ready to give to the chiefs of the village. This was not how I imagined wanting to leave. I then sat with the chiefs and I said I was thinking of making the decision to stay, as I did not want to be the one one of these missionaries that fled the scene before disaster hit. The men leaders sat for a while chatting and then said to me, "Toriana, we want you to leave because you could endanger our lives. We know how to hide in rocks and remain hidden. We know how to live on little to no food or water. Our skins become camouflaged in our forests and mountain jungles. Your white skin will be detected by any enemy. It would put our whole tribe at risk." Could not believe what I was hearing, and had never thought that I would be a burden to them. I always thought I was a help to them. In many cases I was, but the reality hit home to me. It is far better for a local who has come to Christ to reach his or her own people than for a foreigner to reach them without endangering their lives. Internet and Skype calls were going to be difficult, and I told Robert we would not be connected for a while. I did not tell Robert what was going on, as I did not want him to fear. I knelt at my bedside and wept and prayed, as I did not know what would happen to me or my team, and I did not know if I was going to ever be able to see Robert again. I really felt like I was in Shakespeare's story, where I finally found the love of my life, my Romeo, but was not sure I would be able to reach him. As I prayed, we could hear gunshots in the distance. We were used to this, but it seemed more than usual. All we could do was pray and hope that they would not advance in our direction. The team of men with Lopit passes had been by foot with a Lopit Jesus film and Moses film in the Lopit Mountains. We had made and had shown it in as many villages as we were able. The school was mostly complete, the training with the booklets was done in most regions, and I felt it was time to take the letter of my dad to the chiefs in the village. In the early hours of the morning I took the letter my dad had typed and I had printed and handed it to them. Lopit men could speak English, translated it, and I stood before them quietly, waiting for their response. There was much discussion among them as they sat on the mangat, that was a bamboo tiered structure. Then they called for silence. The men leaders, Monumiji, said, "Toriana, it's your dad's right to call you home, for he has chosen someone for you to marry. It would be just as we would do. We let you go to return home." Our date for departure came quicker than planned, and some of the Daguna leaders came to see the work that was completed, to hand it over to the Masuva family and fly me out. I can remember getting on the little plane in tears. I was closing a chapter of my life that had been part of me, all my memories with Lopet, my missionary friends, and with Martin. As I cried, Tony, one of the leaders, called me to his side on the plane and held me as I wept. Then he read scriptures and explained that God is calling me into something new, something beautiful, and that I must not look back, but I must look forward into the plans God has for me. It reminded me of the scripture Martin once read to me that he felt was for us, and now I see it was for me, in closing the chapter in the Lopet Sudan. As I read it, my heart felt so excited to leave the former things and run into my beloved Romeo Roberts' arms. Isaiah 43. Remember not the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert.